All right. So, welcome everybody to the Yoga Philosophy Summary or the conclusion of this particular series. And so, tonight's class is going to be split into three segments. So, the first segment is going to be a review of what we've covered thus far. We're going to go through an overview of the different yoga philosophies that we've covered thus far. The second part is going to be a concept of what's called Prakriti and Purusha. And so I've been wanting to talk about those two particular topics, but I just really didn't have a place to fit it in. But it's literally like a very, very huge part of everything that we've been talking about. And so, we talked about it, but we haven't necessarily called it by those names. So we'll go into that. And then the last segment is what I call yogi evidencing God on earth. And so we are going to really go deep into some evidences of the power of yoga in reality, in real life. All right, so before we get started, does anybody have any questions, comments, or anything before we proceed? All right.
So, I got a question, instructor. So we finna go back over like the 8 limbs of yoga, all of the 4 types of yoga. All right, all right, bet.
All right. So we started with the introduction, and we talked about what yoga actually is, and so we came with this definition that Patanjali gave us. And he said, Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha. So can anybody expound on this particular concept that we talked about right here? This review is actually going to be to see what you got out of the class too, to make sure I did my job. So anybody want to jump out there first and talk about this particular subject? Somebody, anybody?
I'll go, instructor.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yoga is the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. And as we understand it from what you've taught with the 8 limbs, these 8 limbs are ways to practice the yoga that will help us to control, slow, or pause the fluctuations of the vrittis or the minds.
Excellent, thank you. Emerson, you got anything to add to that?
Yep. The chitti can be seen as the lake or the mind, the vritti is the waves in the water, the thoughts, and then the rodaha is the restraint. And when you combine all 3, it's when you're completely still. And I had a question about the vrittis. I went back and watched the heart chakra video, and those, I think there were 12 divine vrittis. So I was just seeing the similarities, or asking you about the similarities between this vritti and those vrittis.
Yeah, so this particular one is just specifically states of mind. So, vritti is a larger concept, and obviously we talked about it in the heart chakra as well. But this particular one that we are referring to here is just relegated to states of mind. So I know we talked about the 5 states of mind, and that was what was coming directly out of the Yoga Sutras. So, I know I gave you Yoga Sutra 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4, but directly after those, Patanjali lists the particular vrittis or the mind states that the mind can be in. And so that is where this vritti is coming from.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. All right, anybody else got anything on this particular slide before we move forward? All right. Next, we talked about the origin of the word yoga, and it comes from the word yoke. And the Sanskrit word for yoke is yuj, which is this device that is depicted here. and it was originally used to join cattle together. And so yoga is primarily the spiritual discipline that concentrates on the subtle science that focuses on achieving harmony between the individual's mind and body. And according to the yogic scriptures, the practice of yoga leads an individual to the union of consciousness with the universal consciousness. And it leads to a harmony between the mind, body, and nature. Anybody have anything on this? Anything that I didn't mention or anything that needs to be said here? All right, moving on. So, oh, you had something, Topher?
Yeah, I liked it because I like psychology and the concept of the yoking. I really like this concept with the Atman, the Brahman, and the one in between that controls it. The way I look at it, it reminds me of in psychology, they teach the modern society that there's the id, the super ego, and the ego, whereas the id is the lower natures, your animal brain, and the super ego is like, the one that's looking out for everybody else and working to make you the best version of yourself you can be. But then you got the ego in between, which is always choosing which voice to go with, and I think about like in cartoons when somebody will you have the angel and the devil pop up on the shoulder, and it's like this is really what that's coming from. They got the angel and the little devil, but no one really goes deep. And it's like, no, this is the part of you that identifies, and then there's the other part of you that is, and then there's the part of you that goes back in between, and that's the act of literally the action of going back and forth in between both of those states. So I really appreciated the definition of this. And I was listening to a talk with Sadhguru and Matthew McConaughey, and they were actually talking about this, but it's like they didn't, it was nice to listen to, but they didn't go as deep with this as before. He even gave the definition of it, but they didn't really explain it like how, the presentation did. So I was able to get a much better understanding of it through this.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And, that just says a lot because Sadhguru teaches to, probably a billion people across the planet. And so to hear that, I definitely appreciate it. So, yeah. And we actually going to talk more about what you just said too, just a little bit later on. And one person actually left. So if anybody has to leave, just please let us know because you don't want to miss the end of this. It's literally going to bring everything together. So just a fair warning to anybody who has to leave. All right, next we talked about why do we partake in this whole yoga deal in the first place. And so first, people suffer. If you're a human being on earth, at some point in life, you're going to suffer. Number two, not knowing who we are. Number three, attachment, which is clinging to things that are impermanent and then having expectations. Number four is aversion, which is avoiding things or having things that we don't want. Number five is identifying with ego. And number six is the fear of death. So hopefully out of, the first five presentations, we really drill down into how we, supersede these particular pieces that, have us trapped. So yeah, that's why we do this whole thing. So hopefully you all have this particular list like right at the forefront of your mind, and when we go through all of the presentations, is right there for you to see like how we have answers now to these particular questions, so to speak. All right, moving on. So far, did anybody have any questions or comments before we go into the summary of all of the yogas? All right, no questions, comments. So I thought this particular picture was pretty dope, and it kind of like has all of them together with the chakras in the middle. So it was sweet to me. So I definitely had to use it. But we talked about the 4 different types of yoga. So we started with karma yoga, which is the path of work and service. Then we went to Bhakti Yoga, which is the path of love and devotion. We went to Jnana Yoga, which is the path of knowledge. And then we ended out with Raja Yoga, which is the path of meditation. All right, enough of me. Can somebody read this particular slide? So we're starting back with Karma Yoga.
Karma and oh, you got it.
Karma and Karma Yoga. What is karma? Karma is a Sanskrit word that means action or deed. Anything that a person does, whether physical or mental, is karma. Karma is the sum total of all of our acts, both in this life and in our earlier lives. Karma relates not just to the action, but also the result of the action. The consequence cannot be separated from the action itself. Karma accumulates when actions are done with a selfish motive, when you expect something from the outcomes of the action. However, when the action is done without this expectation, it is liberating. No karma is accumulated. This process continues until you attain a zero balance, i.e. no karma remains. Only then are you free. This means you break the cycle of samsara, the cycle of constant death and rebirth. Karma is not only the physical work, but the process of mental thinking also. When yoga is added to karma, it becomes a practice of union with one's true self through action. Hence, every action which brings our awareness inward to knowing the true self is the part of karma yoga.
Excellent, thank you. Khadija, you can read this one.
All right. Karma yoga is something. The one who sees inaction in the midst of action, and action in the midst of action is wise and can act in the spirit of yoga, with no desire for success, no anxiety about failure, indifferent to results. This person burns up their actions in a fire of wisdom, surrendering all thoughts of outcome, unperturbed, self-reliant, unperturbed, self-reliant. This person does nothing at all, even when fully engaged in actions. There is nothing this person expects, nothing that this person fears. Serene, free from possessions, untainted, acting with the body alone, content with whatever happens, unattached to pleasure or pain, success or failure. This person acts and is never bound by those actions. When a person has let go of attachments and is grounded in wisdom, everything this person does is an act of sacred joy, and all actions melt away.
Excellent, thank you. So you can see just from the practice of karma yoga alone how free one can be. You don't have to be tied down to, a lot of this stuff that people go through and the drama of life, which that's all it really is. And just through practicing karma yoga. Yeah, just through the practice of karma yoga, you can be free. They all lead to freedom at the end of the day. And you can see in this, I'm sure all of us would love to have these things. And so this, is just the first one, karma yoga. So does anybody have any questions or comments about karma yoga? Because next we're moving into Bhakti Yoga after this.
I had a question about the first sentence. The one who sees inaction in the midst of action, inaction in the midst of action. Is that supposed to be action in the midst of inaction, or that is action in action?
Yeah, action in the midst of inaction. Sorry. Good catch. Yeah, because as we discussed in the class, it's all one and the same. So, the idea of all of this is just training the mind, body, and spirit to see through that which is illusory. So, where is action? Where is inaction? All right. Anybody else? Questions, comments, anything about karma yoga? All right. If not, can somebody get this one for me? Bhakti Yoga.
I got it.
All right.
The word Bhakti literally means attachment, state of mind where the devotee surrender himself or herself unquestioningly to God. It's hard to define Bhakti. One can feel it, realize it. With every breath, we sow the seeds of Bhakti, a love that sweeps us away and beyond, us away beyond egoism, helps us to soar above the world and changes us forever, touching the deepest core of our existence, our soul. Bhakti is not about seeking that love, but dropping the barriers against it that we've built inside ourselves. It opens the door to eternity within. It's the love that shines in our eyes as the light of our soul. Bhakti wakes us up to total worship as we start to realize that everything reflects the divine. A practitioner of Bhakti Yoga sees divinity everywhere and yet has an intense longing for the divine.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So yeah, in this Bhakti Yoga, we talked about seeing the divine in everything. So seeing God everywhere. And I know specifically you, Aisha, after this particular class, you definitely had a shift in perspective, and you started to see that, you know, that idea of God being in everything and everywhere. And, you know, it changed your experience as a human being on planet Earth.
Definitely. Definitely.
All right. Anybody have any questions or comments about this?
I have a question.
Yep,
How do you, if you never did this before, how do you see God in everything? You just look at everything as God? How do you do that?
Right. So it's definitely easy yet challenging. And so it's easy because we can see, you know, especially after going through all of the yogas, that everything is just a manifestation of God. And so once you realize that, it now makes it easy to see God everywhere. But at the same time, we have our ego that places judge. And Sunray, you can talk after this if you can. But it's our ego that places judgment on that which is outwardly manifested, and causes us to call it good and bad, right and wrong, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, it's all God, and it's all for a reason. The universe wastes no energy. And so it wouldn't produce anything that wasn't for a purpose. And it is in our ignorance of that purpose of why we don't see God in it.
Okay.
All right.
Oh yeah, I was just saying, when we learned about this, it just gave me a new appreciation for the term love at first sight, just because I know a lot of people look at it in just the romantic or falling in love. But to me, it's just a reminder that everything should be approached with love. Like if I'm forming an idea, instead of forming as something as negative or positive, I just learn to appreciate it for what it is and approach it in love. And it really just changes my perspective on the way that I see things that in the past I would have seen as negative or bad. It just makes me think about, like, you know, I love sunny days, but I won't be mad when I see the rain, because I know that there's, you know, life and cleansing and healing and different powers and pretty much everything that nature has to offer. So you just have to see that, as opposed to seeing it for how we've been socially conditioned to see things, and go against that grain and just look at it with love.
Excellent. And that was actually another perspective on Teresa's question about how do you see God in everything. Same way, just approach it with love and approach it as if it's approaching you in love.
May I offer something?
Yep, go ahead.
To that specific question. When you step outside and you inhale this invisible air, this invisible oxygen, you hear these invisible sounds, have these invisible thoughts and tastes, invisible feelings, and you can step outside and you can see that sun, And the same sunlight that's on me is the same sunlight that's shining on you wherever you are. That knowing and that realization that you, nor I, nor anybody on this phone directly created that, and if you did, you certainly don't remember it. The fact that it is, and it sustains us perpetually, is how I am able to worship all the time, a constant state of worship and appreciation, because the divine put it all together, and it did it without your conscious consent. And you come into this space and you leave this space, and it still is, because it's been doing what it's been doing for trillions of years. And all the things that I named are invisible. So the same way, you know, it's only a matter of seconds that you don't have that oxygen, that you won't be here in this state no more, but yet it is. It's the same way I rest in the fact that the Most High is the Most High, the Creator is the Creator, the angels, the ancestors, and the rest are so. So whether you see it or not, you living in it. And that right there makes it easy for me to worship all day, every day, period. Hope that gives you some perspective, whoever asked that question.
Yeah, that was Teresa. And that's another beautiful example. So we hit it from 3 different angles. So hopefully out of our 3 examples, it gives you a better handle on it.
Instructor, can I add on a little bit?
Yep, go ahead.
Peace, everybody. I just wanted to just contribute. I think I understand that question. I know for years, I've been challenged by just seeing the divinity in everything. And after a number of years toiling in that question, like how is everything of God, especially when we've been indoctrinated with this concept of the devil and God, and everything is not of God, and so somewhere between our standard education or scientific education or Western scientific education and our religious education, somehow in there we have this separation between us and spirit, and that's what, once we began to do our homework in terms of like looking at the genius of our traditional cultures, that's where our traditional cultures really had great genius, because sure, there was always a central creator, but there was always these little deities, and these little deities were really just aspects of nature. We can see this in Ifa, we can see this in Yoruba, we can see this in the Medunetter, we can see this in the Kikuyus way. The genius of our traditional cultures really gave credence to the creator and nature and our connection to it. And so when the discipline of yoga sort of bears witness to that, this is just shining the light that traditionally, before we've gotten into our major religious concepts, really our traditions, it's embedded in our traditions. And so this is more or less a rehashing of something that we have been dealing with for eons. And so there again, genius right there within our traditional cultures. So that's all I want to say. Mm-hmm.
I want to say I'm glad I asked the question, because I couldn't figure it out, but I got all the different things that you all said, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I think what makes it challenging is we don't all share the same concept of God. We don't all share the same concept of love. In this Bhakti Yoga, we remember that there is a distinction. Big love, capital love, and little love. And when you put it in context of what emotionally moves you to have you embrace a distinction of what you claim as being love. For example, the George Floyd situation polarized the global community to where the very concept of love was put on the table for the world to see. And there was and is this still polarization of how that should be expressed. And I think that's what makes this really challenging. It's not as simple as stated when you put it in the context of a global emotional world. And I think what is also interesting here is how we have been given another lens to look at this again for the first time. And that's why, again, you get this deep deliberation and thought surrounding your concept or our concepts of God and love, and having us really deliberate what that is and what lens are we looking at Bhakti Yoga through. And that's why I think it's so rich to actually see a living example of it, where we were all who were there witnessed a demonstration, a physical demonstration of Bhakti Yoga with instructor Aku unselfishly giving himself to express a love for the discipline so that others can grow. I think it puts it in perspective when we listen to it and then actually see it. And then, now it's sobering to the point to where it makes you think about it again for the first time. So I think this is very rich and sobering dialogue. So thank you, instructor, for offering this to us.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that perspective, and it also reminds me of another point that we talked about inside of this Bhakti Yoga with using the particular form of whatever deity as a means to that union. So, as we say, yoga is union, and this particular union is the union of the union through the vehicle of love and devotion. And so just having that form of the deity that you are, expressing your love and devotion to, it now gives you a target versus, just saying, oh yeah, I love everything and everybody. It really gives you a pinpointed focus to where you can now, aim that love to a specific point and, cultivate that and then expand it out. And so everything you said was directly on point and in line with what we are talking about here.
Did they do it right?
All right, so this is from the Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 6, which is the chapter about Bhakti Yoga. And chapter 6, verse 29 says, "A true yogi observes me, capital M-E, in all beings, and also sees every being in me, capital M-E. Indeed, the self-realized man sees me everywhere. For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me." And so that kind of just sums up exactly what we just said about seeing God in everything and using our love and devotion as a pathway to union or yoga. All right, next we're gonna move on to Jnana Yoga. Did anybody have any questions or comments or anything else about Bhakti Yoga?
Yes, sir. I have one, maybe two comments about Bhakti Yoga. It really reflects strongly in my life, especially with everything I got going on presently and before, especially with all the anger, whatever. We're not gonna get into that. But at my wedding, in Vegas and everything, all the people that was around me, everybody was fighting, but I was just calm and touched. Even my fiance went through a little issue. I spiked up a little bit, but I was just calm. Cause I was like, it's gonna work out because you really can't control any situation because the universe at every point puts you here, and that's how you got here. So no matter what you do, it's still gonna happen. Even if you have no action, that's still an action. So you got to know and see that. And the beautiful part about that is it makes you really think about all the stuff you miss because you worry about the wrong thing. That's all I got.
I was gonna say we might as well just say class over. Everybody go home after that. Man,
I know that's right.
Right.
Mic drop, right?
Man, that was a mic drop on top of a mic drop. No, that's great though, man. And you in that statement, that just made this whole class worth it because it's a whole lot of work that people don't see, don't realize, don't understand, to be able to sift through all of the information that's out there and be able to develop a class such as this where everybody gets to take away, because there are so many lectures that I watch about this stuff and don't have any, like, what was the point? And just in you saying that lets me know inside of this review that you got it. You got what it is that we sought to give, and that action or inaction evidences everything that we've been talking about here. Because I know, at some point before you met us or met me or met whoever that is involved with the 36, you wouldn't have approached that situation like that. And so just seeing that change in behavior shows me and shows the rest of the instructors that learning has taken place. And so that's all that we ask, out of everybody, And so that was excellent. We appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate you, instructor. We got married on your birthday.
Excellent. You couldn't have picked a better day. Thank you. All right, let's move on because we got some stuff to cover here. All right, can somebody read this one for me? This is Jnana Yoga, and this is the yoga of knowledge. And so every yoga, as we talked about, addresses a certain problem. And so in this particular yoga, the problem that we are addressing is the problem of ignorance. And so ignorance in the form of taking Maya or illusion as reality. And so Jnana Yoga changes ignorance to knowledge through the practice or unveiling or uncovering of what Maya is. So can somebody read this one for me, please? And that name is Paramahansa Yogananda, for whoever reads this.
I can, instructor.
All right.
The delusionary power inherent in the structure of creation, by which the one appears as many. Paramana Hanasa Yogananda.
Paramahansa Yogananda.
Paramahasa Yogananda wrote, the Sanskrit word Maya means the measurer. It is the magical power in creation by which limitations and divisions are apparently present in the immeasurable and inseparable. Maya is nature herself, the phenomenal worlds ever in transitional flux as antithesis to divine immutability. Maya is the veil of transistorance in nature.
Transitoriness.
Transitor to be transit to be okay. In nature, the ceaseless becoming of creation, the veil that each man must lift in order to see behind it the creator, the changeless, immutable, eternal reality. The consciousness of the unenlightened person is blinded by four successive veils of Maya, delusion, which prevent him from perceiving truth of God. Atomic form, the world of gross material manifestation, wherein the one substance appears as innumerable objects. 2. Space, whereby the idea of division is produced in the ever indivisible. Time, whereby the mind conceives of change in the ever unchangeable. Vibration, the universal creative force that obscures our realization of the ever uncreated.
Yeah, my bad. Sorry, that was a tongue twister. But this is the yoga of knowledge, so that's what it is. And so, but in this particular one, we really drill down in that everything that we, you know, believe or honor as real is a part of Maya or the illusion, aka the measurer. So anything that we, you know, have as a division, i.e., numbers, letters, words, etc., are all a part of this divine illusion or Maya. And so this encompasses everything that, you know, physics has told us is real. So the atomic world, space, time, and vibration or causation. So all of that is a part of the illusion. And once we can see through that, we can now start to remove the veils that cover the truth, i.e., God. And so all of that is a part of freedom. All right. So Maya or illusion continued. Maya is the mass hypnosis of God by which he makes every human being believe in the same illusory reality of creation as perceived by the senses. Avidya, which is ignorance, gives individuality of form, experience, and expression. It supports the ego or the I consciousness. Swami Shankaracharya said that you never identify yourself with the shadow cast by your body or with its reflection, or I'm not sure who that is writing, what that is, but yeah, you never identify yourself with the shadow cast by your body or its reflection or with the body you see in a dream or in your imagination. Therefore, you should not identify yourself with this living body either. So it is right in line with that. And so, you know, we really talked about how, you know, we really distinguish the difference of, you know, the body as a shadow cast by your body, its reflection, the body we see in a dream, the imagination, and the body that we see in, so-called reality. So why do we identify with one, but we don't identify with others? And it's because of that Maya or illusion that we identify with one, but not the other. All right, and this is the last one. Can somebody read this one for me, please?
I'll read it.
Go ahead.
Okay. Jnana Yoga is a process of learning to discriminate between what is real and what is not, what is eternal and what is not. Through a steady advancement in realization of the distinction between real and the unreal, the eternal and the temporal,
Mm-hmm.
one develops into a jnana. This is essentially a path of knowledge and discrimination in regards to the difference between the immortal soul, Atman, and the body. It is the process of converting intellectual knowledge into practical wisdom. Jnana literally means knowledge, but in the context of yoga, it means the process of meditative awareness which leads to illuminative wisdom. It is not a method by which we try to find rational answers to eternal questions. Rather, it is a part of meditation leading to self-inquiry and self-realization. Before practicing Jnana Yoga, the aspirant needs to have integrated the lessons of the other yogic paths. For without selflessness of, I apologize. For without selflessness and love of God, strength of body and mind, the search for self-realization can become mere idle speculation. Taking the philosophy of Vedanta, the Jnana yogi uses his mind to inquire into its own nature. We perceive the space inside and outside the glass as different, just as we see ourselves as separate from God. Jnana Yoga leads the devotee to experience his unity with God directly by breaking the glass, dissolving the veils of ignorance, Maya.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that. So yeah, in this one we also had a parable about a person building a boat or a raft to cross the river, and then once he gets to the other side of that river, he can either leave the boat or the raft in the water, or he can take the raft with them onto land. And so in this particular yoga, we use the mind as the raft to get across the river or the chasm to the truth. But at a particular point, the mind or the raft can only take you so far. It's only useful to a certain point, and then after that, we don't need it anymore. And so that is what this particular slide is saying, is that we use knowledge to get to a certain point, but after that, we have to leave the knowledge behind, because when we get to the truth, knowledge is no longer relevant. It's not is unneeded, but is needed to get to a certain point. So, it's kind of like a self-referential thing where it say we use the mind to inquire into its own nature. And so, in essence, it's kind of like taking a surge protector and then plugging it back into itself. We are using the mind to inquire into its own nature. And so, again, in that particular context, we can only get so far. So does anybody have any questions or comments about this before we move on to Raja Yoga?
I just like to say that it reminds me of learning martial arts or any formal discipline, that you're learning it to forget it. You're learning the techniques in your mind and your body so that it's there, but then it just becomes part of you. Would you say that's similar to what you're saying here?
Yes, exactly. That's actually that is a perfect example, and it also further solidifies the reason why we have the discipline, because everything is in the discipline, and the discipline is in everything. And so, and we are talking about yoga in this case, but you see how it goes right back to the discipline. So the discipline was literally delivered or handed to us by the creator to get certain things that we need to get as human beings living on earth. And so that is one of them, learning to forget. Anybody else questions, comments about Jnana Yoga before we move to Raja Yoga?
I think again, and just this is my favorite one. This is one that I identify with the most because it always keeps me in a constant mind of a student of the discipline, a student of the world, where I put it in context to draw lessons from, to where I can take two figures from society, for example, a David Duke and a Malcolm X, and see or am put in a position to see and study the God in both, where you truly have to be a student of sorts to embrace a sense of detachment, even to approach it. And this is what is so, I guess, I don't know what term I'm looking for now, to where it keeps me humble and sober-minded, in my travels in this construct, to where you have these figures that are constantly put forth to society at large to test love, big love, little love, to test knowledge of self, knowledge of kind, to test all of these things. And when you have two figures that are diametrically opposed to each other, and you are charged with the responsibility to see God in both. Study to show yourself approved. You know what I'm saying? Study to show yourself approved now, in the flux of emotion, which is sobering, which makes this, what you're offering, so rich, because when you put this in context and then you ask the question, and I offer two figures that are diametrically opposed to each other, and then challenge you to see God in both, what can you tell me? So again, brother, much appreciation. You know what I'm saying? So this keeps me in a constant state of study, where you truly need to study to show yourself approved here. So thank you again.
Thank you. And sure you blew a lot of minds with that one. Because, we can all see the love and God and all of that stuff in the things that we deem as beautiful or, operating out of love. But what about those things that, what we deem or what we color as operating out of hate? How do we still see God? How do we still see love in that person? And that was another thing that, we distinguished out of Bhakti Yoga is that all things are truly operating out of love, but that's where we distinguish the big love and little love. Is it operating out of love for self? Meaning that if I see you have a lot of money and I don't have any, I go steal your money because I'm loving myself and I feel like I should have that money and not you. So that's little love. Or do I operate out of God? But either way, we are operating in love. But is it love for the ego, love for self, or is it love for God? Excellent. All right. Anybody else? Any questions or comments about anything?
Yes, sir. I got my hand up.
Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of touch on a couple of things that the other my I won't say my favorite instructor because I love all y'all in a different way, but my most most entertaining instructor because he keep me cracking up. He touched on a lot of things that as a brother as a square you have to look at like because in everything that we try to do as far as my organization is to try to help whether they feed the hungry or try to when they have disasters.
All right, you over your try limit. That was 3.
Oh, I did. My bad.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
With every situation, we look for a better way to help the organization, the community, whatever. Anything, the big love, the big L, not the little L. So we donate millions of dollars to different organizations. One organization that we caught stealing the money, and it was supposed to be a disaster relief fund. They stole like $15,000 from the group, and when our treasurer found out about it, he was like, "Yo, we finna press charges, whoop the whoop," and we was like, "No, we're not gonna do that. We're just gonna go down there and just make sure the money go where it's supposed to go, and talk to who we need to talk to." And to me, that was amazing. And since I've only been traveling 15 years, it's like I don't have really high status. So all the bigger brothers was like, "No, we ain't gonna do that." Because the younger brothers was mad. We was like, "They took our money. We going ham." They was like, "No, we don't do that. Just sit down." And we got it. They went down there, talked to the man, found the money, worked it out. The people got everything, and it all worked out because we were angry about the gifts, but we was attached to giving them the money. So whatever they did with it, we shouldn't have been attached to it. And the biggest brother seen that quick off the muscle. It's like y'all too hot. Just because it's the money, we don't have any. Oh, my earphone's about to die. We don't have any attached to that. We just want to get the goal done. We want to help the people. And being angry and going after them and having them arrested or whatever the situation is still not going to help the people. And that's the big L. And when I first got into the life, that introduced me to that. But it's so vast that in everything, like he was saying, even with the good or what we deem as evil, because the Klan and they say Malcolm X say eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But then we all be blind with no mouth, with a mouth full of blood. You know what I mean?
Excellent. Yeah, that's a great analogy and definitely a great perspective. Appreciate that. Right. I'm glad to have you back, man. We definitely notice the difference with you and without you. So I'm glad you're here. You always contribute positively. So we appreciate that. But yeah, we're gonna move on because I'm not even halfway done yet, and we got a lot to get through. All right, so Raja Yoga or King Yoga or Royal Yoga. is the yoga that Patanjali introduced. And so, again, we are always, solving a problem. And so, in this particular case, the problem that we seek to solve is the problem of a busy mind or chattering mind. So, in this particular case, the biggest obstacle to self realization is a busy mind in which excessive thinking, ego, craving, attachment, and the egoic concept of a me, small m, which is individual and separate from the rest of the universe. The irony is that these obstacles, quote unquote, are actually normal functions of a human mind. So we talked about that. But we have forgotten that there is a deeper part of ourselves which comprises the mind, experiences our existence, and love underlies and embraces everything. The direct experience to this is to know the self, capital S. The way to overcome these obstacles is by calming down the activity of the mind and resting in that, capital T, which remains when all thinking and patterning of consciousness ceases. This indescribable aspect of existence is often referred to as, quote unquote, our true nature or Brahman. A separate sense of self contributes towards our suffering, which was right on the list that we talked about. Why do we even do yoga in the first place? Working through the mind and body practices outlined in Patanjali's 8 limbs of yoga is believed to bring the practitioner close to an enlightened state of consciousness known as samadhi, in which it is possible to experience the true self. And that should be a capital S. Raja Yoga is ultimately a means of transcending the identification with the mind body intellect complex in order to understand the nature of the true self. And so this was last week's class, which was Raja Yoga. And we talked about the 8 limbs of Raja Yoga, which are Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. So those are the 8 limbs. And particularly, I want to call your attention because I said we were going to revisit this today, which we are, with the last 3 or the upper 3. So you see we got 5 on this side and we got 3 on this side. So the upper 3 are together, the 3 together are known as Samyama. So the last 3 rungs, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi, or concentration, meditation, and absorption, are the final 3 rungs of yoga. Dharana, which is concentration, is the process of holding or fixing the attention of mind onto one object or place. So remember, in the water scenario, we looked at this one as a big wave. So instead of a whole bunch of little waves, in the water is just one big wave because we are fixing or holding the mind onto one object or place. And then dhyana is meditation, which is sustained concentration, whereby the attention continues to hold or repeat the same object or place. So this is like that still water. And then the last one is samadhi, which is deep absorption, wherein the only the essence of that object, place, or point shines forth in the mind as if the mind were devoid of its own form. So this was actually diving into the water, so absorption. So the stages of attention is attention itself, which is progressively moving inward through these few stages. So that attention, which is pratyahara, where we just watch the waves, leads to concentration, and concentration leads to meditation, and meditation leads to absorption or samadhi. Does anybody have any questions or comments about Raja Yoga?
Instructor, can you go back to the tree, please?
Yep.
Because my letters are Yama, Niyama, Asana,
Yep.
Pranayama,
Yep.
Dharana.
You skip one. Pratyahara.
Oh, that's the one I missed. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought you skipped it because you couldn't pronounce it.
No, I missed one. I was wondering why my numbers was off, but I missed one. So that comes after pranayama. Okay.
Yeah.
Pratyahara, which is withdrawal from the senses. Oh, okay. Oh, breath control. There it is. That's where I got lost. Okay. That's 4. All right. Cool. Thank you, instructor.
All right. Yeah, no problem. Anybody else questions, comments about this? All right. Moving on. The mechanics of meditation. So remember, Raja Yoga was the path of meditation. So meditation thus acts as a great junction where all spiritual paths converge, meet, go together for a short distance, and then diverge again to their respective goals. Meditation may also be compared to a broad road having several tracks or lanes marked on them for the guidance of motorists. Each meditator keeps to his own lane, but all lanes are a part of one great highway. Meditation is the result of the focusing of consciousness on its true source or center. According to Patanjali, before one attempts dhyana, which is meditation, one should gain proficiency in dharana, fixing the mind, pratyahara, withdrawing the senses from mental objects. This withdrawal is defined by Patanjali as a state in which the senses detach from external objects, which is hardly ever, because when do you detach your senses from external objects? When literally you use your senses to interact with quote unquote external objects. Become one with the manas, or the mind, which is referring to Yoga Sutra 2, chapter 2, 54. When this is practiced for a long time, the mind alone remains active. Only then is true meditation possible. So, revisiting this. So now we see again how all roads lead to meditation, which is here. So, Bhakti is a form of meditation, Raja is a form of meditation, Jnana is a form of meditation, and Karma is a form of meditation. And that meditation allows you to see your true capital S self and how that self relates to that which is illusory, aka space, time, and causation. So it literally leads to all the roads lead directly to union, yoga, meditation. All of that is interchangeable. All right, any questions or comments? So that was the review of all of the yogas. And now we're going to move into the second part if anybody doesn't have any questions or comments. Theo, you had a question or a comment?
I'm sorry, instructor. I had to take you off, taking myself off speaking, so I just moved my papers around.
Okay. Anybody else questions, comments? All right, going once, going twice.
Wait a minute, instructor, hold tight.
Go ahead.
Can you go back one slide? I wanted to look at that. All right, go back another one, please. One more, please. Okay, yeah. This one right here. No. Go back forward one. The one after this one. Yes. Okay. Instructor, real quick. So why? No. The one before. So you were on Raja Yoga, but then this has a different title. Can you go back?
Yeah. All of these. So it's interchangeable. So yeah, Raja Yoga is a name, which is royal or king yoga, And then Ashtanga Yoga just means 8 limbs. So it's specifically referring to these 8 limbs, but it's still interchangeable. You know, and we can use the names interchangeably. So Raja Yoga is referring to yoga of meditation, and this Ashtanga Yoga is specifically referring to these 8 limbs, but you know, they are interchangeable. They mean the same thing.
Got it. Thank you, sir.
Yep, no problem. All right. Anybody else before we move forward? All right. So so that was all the review. So now we moving into something new. And this was the piece that I wanted to include, but I just didn't know where to include it in the prior presentation, so I'm including it here. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about these two concepts, because they are literally like the foundation of everything that we talk about. And I would hate for any of you all to go to anybody and say, I took a yoga philosophy class, and they ask you, what is Prakriti and Purusha? And then you have no idea. It'll be like, oh, what class did you take? Because, you know, that's literally the foundation. So that's where this is coming from. So this is the second piece of this particular presentation. All right, so Prakriti and Purusha. So the universe is the union or the combination of Prakriti and Purusha, which is the feminine and masculine aspect of creation. So I believe I don't believe it was in the Jnana Yoga class, and Megan talked about her understanding of the divine Leela. So the interaction between Prakriti and Purusha is that divine Leela that she was referring to. So, you know, she leapfrogged me, but it was all in divine order. But yeah, so this is that dance of Prakriti and Purusha, which we would call the divine Leela. So Prakriti manifests itself as every gross or subtle, living or non-living matter in the universe, while Purusha is the cause behind the movement of that matter. So Purusha remains unchanged or inactive, and Prakriti staying active and changeable. So you see that, you know, it can be likened to the law of conservation of energy, which says that there are only 2 types of energies, which are kinetic and potential. And so, you know, the entire system of energy is conserved, but in that conservation, potential energy transforms itself into kinetic energy and then back to potential energy. So it's the exact same thing here, that, you know, divine duality, that masculine and feminine. So here we just call them Prakriti and Purusha. All right. Somebody want to read this for me? I don't see any
real quick
words.
Instructor, could you go back real fast before we move on? Thank you.
Yep.
I read the instruction.
All right. Have at it.
Thank you.
Purusha refers to transcendent God or Father or Supreme Spirit beyond all creation. While the term may convey the abstract and immaterial laws that govern the universe, the word Purusha also
Purusha
also means the omnipresence and indestructible cosmic person. In the Vedic period, Purusha referred to a cosmic man who was sacrificed by the gods to create all life.
Hold on one second. Hold on. So where it says in that Vedic period, we are literally talking about the Vedas. So remember, we talked about the 4 Vedas, and in specific, we talked about the Rig Veda. But yeah, so that is out of the Vedas, which they are referring to. And Purusha was actually the name of a god who was sacrificed by other gods to create all life. So it's in reference to a parable or a story, but that's what that Vedic period is talking about. Go ahead.
Okay. Purusha meaning a person or conscious being in a Sanskrit term for the cosmic being beyond the universe. The spirit within all things. The entire universe is manifestation of a cosmic person. Wow, stoked. This cosmic person endows very creatures with personhood or a sense of self, not only humans, but also animals and the ultimate of all of nature. The goal of classical yoga, as defined in the Yoga Sutras and the Patanjali, the prime and ancient textbook of yoga, is the realization of the Purusha or cosmic being as our true self. The Purusha or true self is the ultimate goal of the Vedic practice.
Vedic practices and all Vedantic philosophy.
And all Vedantic philosophy. Examination and inquiry. Yoga is a path of self-realization in the deeper sense of the this cosmic self, big S. Cosmic self, not simply knowing of human self, small s, but realizing the entire universe within our own minds and hearts. Our true self, big S, is the universal self, or Purusha, that exists within all nations. The greater concern of yoga practice is uniting our limited consciousness with the unbound, infinite awareness that is the self of all, big S.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So you can see, like, everything we talked about thus far has pointed to this, but now we actually put a term to it. So we have a new vocabulary term or word here, which is Purusha. And then this one is Prakriti. So I'm gonna read this one because it needs to be explained as well. So Prakriti is the creative power of God, the aspect of spirit as creative mother nature. Prakriti is responsible for the illusion and the sense of duality. Through the interplay of the gunas, it binds the indwelling Purusha to the sense objects. Prakriti is comprised of 3 intertwined subtle natures compared to 3 strands of rope. And guna literally means a strand of a cord or a rope. So Purusha is that supreme conscious being behind everything. And then Prakriti is the creative power. So it's what puts that unmanifested and makes it manifest. So it has 3 attributes called sattva, tamas, and rajas. So sattva is the good, the positive attribute, influences towards good, truth, purity, spirituality, and wisdom. Tamas is the evil or the negative attribute, influences toward darkness or evil, untruth, inertia, ignorance, and delusion. And rajas is activity, and that's the neutral attribute. It is the activating quality working on sattva to suppress tamas, or tamas to suppress sattva. It creates it creates constant activity and motion, greed, restlessness, and desire. So if you want a pictorial example, you can think about this like a candle. And so the wax part of the candle is Thomas. The fire or the flame of the candle is Rajas, and then the heat that is produced would be Sattva. And so this is literally what makes up Prakriti. So everything that is creation is broken down into these, and then the force behind it is this Purusha.
Instructor, you said, can you go back? You said something about the flame. You said the flame would be the Rajas, the Thomas would be
the heat. The Thomas would be the wax.
Oh, okay.
So it's like, you know, it's inertia, like it's dense and thick. So that's the Thomas.
And then the sattva would be the what part?
The heat that's produced by the flame. All right. Anybody have any questions or comments on Purusha or Prakriti?
Yeah, I had a comment on Purusha and like the awareness of spirit. Kind of when you go vegan or when you consume, you know, a bulk of plant-based items, you become, well, from my perception and reflection of it, like you become more sensitive to like the animals and spirituality, even if you're not quote unquote doing it for the animals. The awareness of the spirit becomes more noticeable. I've noticed, and this kind of made me reflect on that.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point, and you would know because you actually grow the food, so you can, you know, you have a different access and awareness and connection with that, you know, the food.
Instructor, can I veggie back off that?
Yep, go ahead.
Really, veggie back, really? Okay.
Yeah. From
then go ahead, Sunray after Theo.
This is something that I was talking to my mother about earlier, and because Gigi actually she does wild ricing, and I can't remember what's the name of it, babe. When you actually the actual, never mind. And I was talking to my mother about like how the process brings about, you know, eating the rice it makes you feel a different way, you know what I mean? And that's just from the perspective of something that is not mammal or animal, right? And then I've had the experience of slaughtering chickens before also, and it is a totally different way of being, eating the meat that you actually saw them grow, cared for them, you know, and it just the way you have to like soothe them upon the process of slaughter. Like it's a whole nother it's just way it does bring about a different type of appreciation. Anyway, that's all.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Sunray.
Oh, I just had my hand up to read. I forgot to put it down.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, you can read the next one. So, there you go.
Cosmic being with capital B. At the time of death, while the constituent elements of the individualized Prakriti go back to their respective universal elements, the indwelling Purusha and the Jiva go to the higher or the nether worlds, depending upon the latter's past karma and the place, time, and manner of its death. The mental condition in which the soul leaves the body at the time of death is very important, because whatever the person thinks of at that time, that alone he achieves thereafter. Thus, if someone departs from the body thinking of God alone, he would undoubtedly attain him. Correct knowledge and awareness of the Purusha and Prakriti can be a true source of liberation for human beings. By understanding what is Prakriti in what is Purusha correctly, a yogi can develop perfect attitude towards both and develop right discrimination to perform desireless action for self-realization. Thus, he who knows Purusha and Prakriti with its gunas, even if engaged in all types of action, will not take birth again in this mortal world.
So hopefully you all can see the importance of this, and this particular concept should have been or should be worth the price of admission, because it's literally helping you after death to not have to come back to this place. Instructor Nate, did you want to say anything before you had to leave?
A couple things I could say. Honestly, this fourth stage of yoga is honestly where I've been lately. Like, I'll wake up in the morning, meditate for like 10 minutes, and then I'm just in meditation all day. And it's brought me a clarity that I've never known before. I've been able to synchronize with my environment in a way that I've never even experienced. And I had an experience on Sunday where I actually went up into the mountains and took a hike on what's called the Tanglewood Trail. And it was crazy because it was like everything you're talking about in this class before the class even began, because on the walk, I could feel God in the air. I could hear his voice in the river. Like, his presence was with me wherever I went. And I was hardly able to meditate because going into that meditation took me into a place where it was like almost going into the next dimension. And then when I was coming back, like, I could honestly see God in everybody I passed. And there were people I came across that had some nasty attitudes. And honestly, like, it didn't matter because I could see that light of our Lord in them. And, you know, even Moses, after coming down off Mount Sinai, said that the light of God exists in every man. And I just kept reflecting on that. And like, some people I came across had like this really bad attitude, but as soon as I'd look at them and smile, it like caused a shift in them. It was really interesting. And then like, I also came across the Asian family when I was at the bottom of the trail, and they just looked at me like, oh my God, like, I know who you are. And I just like smiled and just kept walking. It was a really profound experience, but it kind of just brings everything that you've been talking about with all these 4 different paths of yoga together.
Wow, yeah, that was amazing. Thank you. And I'm glad you shared that before you had to exit. So please, if you could, just catch the rest of this on the recording, because this next piece is definitely very important, and I'm sure you'll appreciate it.
Definitely, instructor. I'm waiting to hear back from instructor Amana right now, so I'm gonna go ahead and hang out until I have to get off.
All right, cool. So yeah, that was a very, very heavy slide. Hopefully you all got that. Not go back and listen to it on the recording. So the human being is a replica of the greater universe, which itself has an organic structure like the human body. We are an expression of the self-consciousness universe, or self-conscious universe, holding both spirit and nature within ourselves. This means that we exist in all things, not as separate species, but as a part of the underlying fabric of awareness. Through the unity of consciousness, the human being is the universe, and the universe is a human being. We could say the material universe is the body of consciousness, while consciousness is the soul of the world. This conscious person is both man and woman, the great god and great goddess, both the cosmic masculine and the cosmic feminine powers. It is not simply the essence of humanity, but the prototype for plants, animals, stars, and planets. The cosmic person is the universal form, the prime archetype behind all being, and the I behind the I in all creatures. And I included this picture to show as above, so below. Feminine, masculine, sun, moon, light, day, night, cetera, et cetera. So pretty much these two slides kind of bring together the whole thing and everything that we've been talking about thus far. So anybody have any questions or comments before we move on to the third and last part of this presentation?
Instructor, if you go back to the slide that discusses the being reborn. Okay. Gunners, can you what is that word? What is the meaning of that word again, please?
Yep, so that was here. So gunas are literally a strand of a cord or rope. And so the three gunas are here. Sattva, Tamas, and Rajas are the three gunas.
I got you.
And you'll see it as Trigunas, trigunas, or the three gunas.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Anybody else questions or comments about this before we move on?
I got a question. It's kind of unrealistic, but it might be. If you are the cosmic being, you actually lock into all of your powers, couldn't you just live forever or just stop the actual karma process? Or would you think it would take too long to try to figure out?
Yeah. So you leapfrog me too. That's the next part of this presentation. So we're gonna answer that. Anybody else? Questions, comments? All right, we're gonna move forward. All right, so this particular portion is called Yogi, evidencing God on earth. So we talked about Samyama earlier, which is the combination of the last three parts of the Ashtanga Yoga, which is concentration, meditation, and samadhi. All right. So Patanjali writes that siddhis, which are translated as perfection, accomplishment, attainment, or success, after mastery of the last three steps of the Eightfold Path. And I hope everybody, take a deep breath, sit up, and really pay attention, because this is very, very interesting and is directly out of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, chapter 3. All right, Patanjali writes, the siddhis are attained after mastery of the last three steps of the Eightfold Path. The ability to simultaneously sustain concentration, meditation, and samadhi at will. Sustained in this context means holding a highly focused, unwavering, deeply absorbed meditative state. Considering that beginning meditators may be satisfied to hold on to an unwavering focus for 10 seconds, being able to do this for 15 minutes at a time may seem incredible. For hours without end is practically incomprehensible. But that's the level of mental control said to be required to exercise and attain siddhis on demand. And again, siddhis are perfection, accomplishment, attainment, or success. Depending on the nature of the object one is absorbed into during samyama, different siddhis are said to arise. This is not due to magical incantation, but a natural consequence of merging with the object of focus. For example, if one focuses on another person in samyama, one becomes the other person. The siddhi that arises is what we would call telepathy. All right, and so before I move to this next section, I want to preface it by saying that this is presented from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. So it's not like I'm agreeing or disagreeing, I'm believing or disbelieving. I'm just literally the messenger as to what was said in chapter 3 of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. All right. So let's move on. So he specifically talked about 8 cities inside of the Yoga Sutra in chapter 3. So the first one is the ability to become the smallest size known. By obtaining this city, the practitioner can reduce one's body to even the size of an atom or become invisible. He becomes supernaturally strong and congenial. The next one is the ability to expand one's body to an infinite large size. By obtaining this city, the practitioner is able to expand the size of his body larger than the universe. He can attain the power equivalent to God who has created the universe. And so I also want to preface this by saying that, you know, these things may sound unbelievable, but at the same time, he didn't say that this was happening in the 3-dimensional plane of existence. So this might be happening at the astral level or the subtle level. It might not be on the growth level. So just keep that in mind, and also keep an open mind. The next one, the ability to become infinitely heavy. The practitioner can make himself as heavy as he desires to be and cannot be moved by anyone or anything. The next one, number 4, the power to become weightless or lighter than air can be achieved. The practitioner can become any creature on earth and enter into his body after attaining this city. Number 5, the ability to construct anything. The practitioner can achieve anything he desired through this city. There is nothing impossible for him to get, or for him to get, such as providing water in the deserted area. And this particular city was actually evident if anybody has read the autobiography of a yogi, where Paramahansa Yogananda, he manifested a mansion in the Himalayas, and we'll talk about his follower and his devotee a little bit later. But he met with Paramahansa Yogananda in the Himalayas, and he, you know, constructed or manifested this mansion that was right there, that wasn't there prior. The next one, number 6, is the ability to become whatever the practitioner desires. The thoughts of the person changes drastically and experiences a flow of supernatural energy. By achieving this ability, the practitioner is able to do anything he wants. He can fly in the sky or walk on water. And so hopefully you can see the Christ in achieving this one, because, you know, it was said that he walked on water. And so now you can see how he did it. Number 7, knowing all powers and getting control over them. The practitioner is able to get control on all the elements of universe, all the elements of the universe, and possess absolute lordship. He gets the privilege to practice lordship on anyone from states to empires. He gets converted into God himself. And the last one is the ability to get control over life or death. So this is what you was talking about, John. With the help of this city, one attains control over all kinds of living and non-living things. The one who excels in this city can influence any person on this earth. All right, so that was the city. So anybody have any questions or comments on that before we move on to the last segment?
Yes, sir. I have a comment on that whole piece. Wow. Yeah. Wow. Okay, hold on. My thing about that is most memories or most tales of fairy tales are written in myth of dragons, King Arthur, and people that could shape shift and walk on water and disappear and reappear. And I was doing my research, and most myths are rooted in history. The people that did things, the people that seen things, or people that wrote down things, or people that did the things that they seen. And looking at this, it's like, I can't believe it now, because that's crazy how you say, oh no, that's impossible, blah, blah, blah. But look at Medusa lived 10,000 years or whatever. Had, you know what I'm saying, King Arthur reigned victorious every time they battled, they always won. I mean, like, what was this man? Merlin made dragons appear and disappear at will. I can see that. It got to come from somewhere.
For
Same
sure,
as the same as the same.
exactly. As they say, art imitates reality. So you already know. Anybody else questions, comments on this?
I'd like to say something about the cities.
Go ahead.
When I was taught along the way, I was taught that in the practices of yoga, you would potentially have these cities. And like they talk about levitation, and they would refer to the yogis that have been, like, Westerners would have them in the hospital and check their, they could stop their heartbeat for a certain like long periods of time. I mean, it was proven by quote unquote our science. And it's like, that's the only way we could understand it. But there was yogis that were doing this, but they were also living in a way without TVs, they were fasting, they were following something that, it's like, sometimes it seems like these things are so outlandish, but they're only outlandish because most of us, well, I won't speak for most of us, but a large part of the world's population is either living in total poverty and their needs are not even being met. There's, simple human needs are not being met, or there's overabundance and we're like being crushed by it. So the cities are something that I was taught that could be developed. However, the catch was you couldn't show them off or exploit them or expose them. It's kind of like wearing your belt outside of the dojo. It's like, even now, my teachers would teach me that these more, I'd say, attractive or like acrobatic or seemingly superhuman asanas, postures, that it seems like everyone is posting on Instagram now, that I was taught that we weren't even supposed to show our practices. And now it's a whole different thing. I'm in the business of yoga, and it's a complicated conversation, but they were kind of dialed down to a more day-to-day form, like mental telepathy, things like, levitation, simple things like that. But communication, nonverbal communication, and the things that our body could do, we could become so light and so strong that no one can believe it. And I think maybe all of us have seen a yoga practitioner where you'll look at them and you're like, what? They can do what? And then all of a sudden you see them, they're like float. It looks like they're floating. They do look like superhuman abilities compared to the average person, but they've developed them over time with these austere practices, and practices that were really supposed to be made private with bhakti, with love and devotion daily, and with ritual. So I wanted to just add dimension to the idea of they aren't so outside of us, and that they actually could be right here and now.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. That was an excellent comment. And two things. So the one is that, like you said, a lot of us aren't even in the space of being able to practice, yoga to its full extent, because we are worried about money and work and jobs and family and safety and all of this stuff. And other people are, worried about other things, stuff that comes with, having money. So, probably more so how to get more money. So, just that puts it outside of the realm of most people, in that this really takes a lot of work. And then the second piece is that, he really, really said, like, this is not something that you go after or you seek. Just like you said, it's something that develops over time as a byproduct. So just like the maneuver is to put you in a position to strike, and the byproduct is that you are not struck. This is the same thing. We practice yoga, and the byproduct is these cities, but it's not something that we seek to attain.
Exactly. That's exactly the teaching. That's so beautifully said. Yeah, parigraha. It's not another. It's practice in detachment.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. All right,
Just
so
like
we got 7 minutes left. So let me go ahead and finish this. All right. So this is another big piece, and which is, you know, further evidencing God on earth. So we talked about samadhi. So whenever you see this word maha, that means like the highest. So when we say like Paramahansa Yogananda, that maha is like the highest. So this is maha samadhi. And so maha samadhi is the great or final samadhi. And it is the act of consciously and intentionally leaving the body at the moment of death. A realized and enlightened Jivan Mukta, which is a realized or enlightened being, a yogi or yogini who has attained the state of nirvikalpa samadhi, which is basically permanent samadhi, can consciously exit from their body and attain enlightenment, often while in a deep conscious meditative state. Associated with this belief is the notion that the individual's karma is extinguished upon death. Some individuals have, according to their followers, declared the day and the time of Mahasamadhi beforehand. And these include Lahiri, his name is very hard to say, but this is who I was talking about. That was the follower of Paramahansa Yogananda. And he was the one who wrote a lot of the stuff that Paramahansa Yogananda was teaching. He wrote it down, so he was his follower. And so his death on September 26, 1895 was of this nature, according to Paramahansa Yogananda. In Yogananda's autobiography, he described how Lahiri stood up and turned around 3 times and then resumed sitting in a cross-legged lotus posture facing north. Paramahansa Yogananda's own death on March 7th, 1952 was described by his followers as entering Mahasamadhi. Daya Mata, one of Yogananda's direct disciples, said that Yogananda on the previous evening had asked her, "Do you realize that it is just a matter of hours and I will be gone from this earth?" So that just shows you and evidences that, you know, he left. He wasn't subject to, you know, death, disease, and decay like everybody else. And, you know, I just thought it to be fitting that we end this, because I know we've been following the teachings of Swami Vivekananda throughout this whole lecture. And I'm sure a lot of people wondered, well, what happened to Swami Vivekananda? And so it would just so happen that he also committed Mahasamadhi. So I'm gonna just read this because it's a lot of words. Swami Vivekananda, a spiritual genius of commanding intellect and power who crammed immense labor and achievement into his short life. He obtained Mahasamadhi at 9:10 p.m. at the age of 39 years and 5 months, fulfilling his own prophecy, "I shall not live to be 40 years old." Just 3 days before his Mahasamadhi, Swami pointed out to his disciple, Swami Premananda, a particular spot on Velour Mass ground where he wished his body to be cremated, and said a great tapasya and meditation has come upon me, and I'm making ready for death. Next day, Wednesday, he observed Ekadeshi. After fasting, Swamiji had some fruits and vegetables. He poured water over his hands and dried them with a towel. When his disciples protested, he said, "Jesus washed the feet of his disciples." Someone checked the answer and muttered, but that was the last time, and his words were left unuttered. At 7 p.m., he went into his room and asked his attendant not to be disturbed. After an hour of dhyana, or meditation, in japa, he called his disciples to open the window and fan his head. He laid down quietly. An hour later, his hands trembled a little and he breathed heavily twice in a couple minutes. His eyes became fixed in the center of his eyebrows, which is aka the third eye, and with a divine expression, the eternal silence fell. There was, said a brother disciple of Swamiji, a little blood in his nostril and about his mouth and in his eyes. According to the yoga scriptures, the life breath of an illuminated yogi passes out through the opening at the top of the head, causing the blood flow in the nostrils and the mouth. The brother disciples thought that he might have fallen into samadhi and chanted the master's name to bring him back to consciousness, but he remained on his back and motionless. And this is what he said. He said, whenever death approaches me, all weakness vanishes. I have neither fear nor doubt nor thought of the external. I'm simply busy making myself ready to die. I am as hard as that, for I have touched the feet of God. I love this picture because it's like, he ready for it. He ready for whatever. And then this is the last piece. So this is actually what Megan just talked about. So it was like she was witnessing me putting this presentation together. But this particular case is called an unusual demonstration. And this is directly talking about what Megan talked about. So recently we had the rare opportunity of investigation of an altogether different and very interesting demonstration of this supposed yogic control over the heart. Yogi Satyamurti, a sparsely built man of about 60 years of age, remained confined in a small underground pit for 8 days in what was, according to him, was a state of samadhi, or deep meditation, with all bodily activity cut down to the barest minimum. The pit was 1.5 meters deep, dug out in an open lawn surrounded by the medical institute buildings, and was completely sealed from the top by bricks and cement mortar. The yogi squatted on the floor of the pit with nothing except a light cotton garment. And about 5 liters of water were placed in a corner, presumably for drinking, but according to the yogi, only to keep the air humid. An ECG was continuously monitored during these 8 days, and various other laboratory investigations were carried out before and after. The ECG leads were kept short enough not to allow any free movement inside of the pit. The straight line on the ECG persisted until about the 8th morning. Then, to our astonishment, electrical activity returned about a half an hour before the pit was scheduled to be open. After some initial disturbance, a normal configuration appeared. Although the sinus trachycardia was still there, there was no other significant abnormalities. The yogi had informed us beforehand that he would come out of his deep trance or suspended animation after nearly 7 days, much in the same way that a normal person wakes up after a few hours of sleep. When the pit was open on the 8th day, the yogi was found sitting in the same posture. So if that's not evidence in God, I don't know what is. And it is 10:02, we're 2 minutes over, so this is the homework. Dare to live the life that you have dreamed for yourself. Go forward and make your dreams come true. Ralph Waldo Emerson. All right, so I'm gonna stop there. I'm gonna stop the recording, and then we can go through whatever commentary people have about this. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Appreciate you. Let me stop this recording.